Can Indians really get rid of the colonial mindset, and are they able to rediscover who they are? Let's look at this together. Let's get into it.
Namaskara and namaskaram. Am I audible? Okay. So I'm grateful to the organizers for giving me an opportunity.
Can I just stop it very quickly right here? Why is it says namaskara and namaskar? Why would someone do that? Like in both ways? Just curious. Let me know in the comments.
Opportunity to engage with students on such a relevant topic. I'm grateful to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share space with Ms. Sudha Murthy, a legend, a living legend. And perhaps I think she's the perfect embodiment of the balance between Bharatiyata and Indianness. I wasn't aware of the journey of the founder of this institution, but frankly speaking, given what he's achieved, I think it's fantastic, it's stellar, and I think he himself is a huge role model for students here. And I don't say this because I've been invited, but I'm frankly astonished at what he has managed to accomplish in his lifetime. So congratulations. I think I've been given 20 minutes. Let me start with a small correction. As an intellectual property lawyer, one of the first things we are told is not to take credit for something that you're not. I am not a Rhodes Scholar, and fortunately so. I can either spend the next 20 minutes trying to speak and sell my books further, or I can say something that is relevant to the theme of the event and something that may be personally relevant to your individual journeys. When we speak of Bharat Unleashed, when we constantly use the word Bharat these days as a fortunate substitute and synonym for India, and a better synonym in fact, and when we keep speaking of Amritkal as defining and animating the next quarter of a century, what does it exactly mean?
What is this Amrukant? I think I got it wrong, but regardless, please let me know in the comments.
It's perhaps easy to spend a few vague generalities which sound great, but what does it really translate to personally for each of us? As a practicing litigator, one of the first things that I'm expected to ask, and as a former engineer, is what is the physical significance of a mathematical equation? What does it translate to? So what is the significance of all these words that are being thrown around? And why is this relevant to an educational institution of all the places? So on the way, I was just thinking of what is it that I must present to this audience. I could either present my personal journey and hold myself up as a role model, which I don't wish to because I'm far from it. Or I could present a broader template for you to work towards, a larger vision, which I think is what drives people who've been invited to this conclave, to this conference, including Mr. Jayashankar yesterday, Mr. Sanyal, and my dear friend Anand Ranganathan, who couldn't come here, fortunately for good reasons. He's been acquitted of the contempt case anyways. When you speak of Bharat Unleashed, in my small, limited head, I think of 3 C's. The first C being the master template or the background in which all of us trace our origins and identity, namely culture. The second C translates to consciousness, which has multiple ramifications. And the third C would be competence. So if I have to weave in each of these 3 C's for the purposes of a student, culturally inspired conscious competence is what I am looking at. Why is this crucial? When we speak of making the transition from India to Bharat, it is a transition from being a lookalike or a duplicate to something that is original. So this fundamental thrust of anybody who speaks of Bharat is originality in thought. That is my thrust as far as my interpretation of Bharat goes.
I'll stop it right here. He almost says like it's daring for you guys to say Bharat, but you have it in your constitution. So this is where I'm not tracking kind of what this, maybe the significance of this is about. And I also see in the subtitles in Bharat, when it says it's always like kind of, you know, wiped out a bit, concealed. So I think that there is a backstory behind that. So please do let me know, but let's see what he says.
Now there are two ways of interpreting original. One is to reject everything that's foreign, or the alternative being, first draw from native thought as much as possible. And where you think foreign thought has contributed better to a particular subject or a particular issue, certainly be inspired by it, but also have the cultural consciousness to Indianize it, to indigenize it, without mechanically and, let's say, slavishly importing any particular idea. The tragedy of the last 70 years of so-called independent Bharat's journey is not lack of talent, but lack of original thought, which is the fount of all confidence for any civilization, for any culture and any society. So it's impossible for an individual to think or assume that his individual confidence has got nothing to do with the confidence that the society enjoys and the very society that he comes from. You may be individually confident of your talent, so to speak, but when you represent a particular identity, especially a civilizational identity such as Bharatiya civilizational identity, you can't hope to have a certain identity or a certain confidence level which is completely independent of it, because the collective identity informs the individual identity and vice versa. Let's break this down for the engineering audience. What does this mean? If there is a certain problem which is commonly, which every civilization faces or which every society faces, what you bring to the table is not just your individual competence, but a certain pattern of thinking that is unique to the civilization that you come from. Which is one of the reasons I strongly believe that even individual competence is significantly inspired by the culture that you come from, which is why there's a Japanese way of thinking, there's a German way of thinking, there's a Swiss way of thinking, there's a Chinese way of thinking, there's an Israeli way of thinking. What is it that defines Bharatiya way of thinking is a question that we have not answered or even asked for the last 70 years. So if I have to look at the next 25 years, what is it that this journey must represent? What does it present to us as an opportunity in this historical time window? And because I'm in an educational institution, I have to make this statement. It is a re-education and a rediscovery and a reawakening of culture, consciousness, and competence, all three. The model of development that we currently subscribe to separates growth and sustainability, separates society and environment, which is one of the reasons that after having destroyed nature and civilization for at least 100 to 200 years, ever since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance and whatnot, suddenly the West has woken up to the concept of sustainable development, something that native indigenous cultures and Eastern cultures have always been familiar with. So today, a culture such as Bharat, whose faith system revolves around nature, chooses to treat sustainable development as a separate topic altogether without connecting it with the question of growth and development. It doesn't reflect originality. It reflects the same slavish mechanical aping and imitation of the West. I see from the questions that have been given to me, one of the questions is, how do we get rid of colonial influences? Let me answer that question as part of my opening dialogue here. I don't think any of us should be looking at freeing ourselves from colonial influences. That is a display of irrational xenophobia. And if anybody thinks that is what I stand for or my message translates to, they're reading it wrong. I'm saying before you respect the rest of the world for the contributions that they have made to the pool of human thought, have the civilizational confidence to respect your community, your society, and your culture first. That's where I come from. Respect for the rest of the world is not mutually exclusive to respect for the self. I don't see this as a zero-sum game where one excludes the other or where one has to survive at the expense of the other. The way of the future is going to be more interdependence and more collaboration, but without losing what is unique to you, without forgetting where you come from. This is especially true in the world of science because there is a certain glamour that is associated with the technological advancement of the West, that it's easy for people who come from this part of the world to forget their roots or even look down upon their roots simply because the last 500 years or let's say 300 years of history has not been particularly kind to us. And therefore, I have only 3 or 4 suggestions to offer to the members of this audience in the hope that this would create a multiplier effect when they go out of this room. 1, your identity needs to strike a balance between who you are as an individual and the society that you come from. Both of them must inform your entire identity. Neither is complete in itself. At a time when you're being constantly told that individual identity and individualism is the pinnacle of human civilization, those societies who have been governed by this thought process, their terminal decline is happening right in front of your eyes, simply because they are not in a position to regain that sense of community, which is crucial simply because it is a reality, it is a civilizational, evolutionary reality that a person or a human being or a man or a woman is a social animal. That sense of identity is being lost. So when you think of Bharat Unleashed, when you think of employability, when you think of sustainability, when you think of growth, when you think of entrepreneurship, the mistake that you will make is to look at them in compartments. They are all connected. Surely this city must stand testimony to the reality of what happens when development and blind development outpaces cultural heritage and respect for nature. Surely this state must have that consciousness because this is perhaps the greenest possible state which has all the blessings of nature. And you can see the devastating transition that is happening right in front of your eyes when the same growth model of Bangalore is visiting other cities such as Mysore and second-tier cities of Karnataka. This is perhaps that time in history when we are poised to go ahead and hire, when we are equally being given an opportunity to hit reset on certain fundamental questions on how do we define growth, how do we define development. Can there be growth and development which is completely oblivious to its impact on nature and environment? I am not a Luddite, I am not anti-technology, I am an engineer myself, I practice in intellectual property, so this is as commercial an area of practice as it can get. And I say that, and I say this with a lot of responsibility, you might have the competence to create a fantastic drilling or boring machine that destroys mountains, but if you lack the consciousness and the civilizational, let's say, conscience to ask whether I should destroy nature in the first place, your competence will come back to kill everything else that you hold dear. So that is an example of a situation where myopic competence prevails over larger questions which affect everybody else. I'm certainly not in the realm of speculation or hypothesis when I say that issues such as climate change, water availability, and so on and so forth are going to animate the discussions for the next 25 to 30 years. That coincides with the 25 years you hope to be the period when Bharat rises again. So especially at a time when history is providing you with an opportunity to revive your roots and reclaim your lost glory, you're also going to be faced with those challenges which are crucial and which are existential. So you need to have answers to both. So my only suggestion is it's easy to perhaps draw certain myopic, short-sighted lessons from YouTube reels and shorts which constantly float and create a personality cult around any individual. But no individual is bigger than the cause, and no individual is bigger than the society, no individual is bigger than the larger community. Competence can sometimes lead to a situation where your individual ego pushes you to the point of oblivion where you don't even know what is it that you're doing, where you're on such an ego high because you think you're so good at something that you don't realize the consequences of your actions on others. The story of development of the last 500 years is exactly that, where individual ego and human supremacism has come at the expense of environment. There is absolutely no respect for non-human beings in the current model of growth and development.
Preach. I could not agree more with this.
I say this as a dog lover, as an animal lover. I say this as someone who equally believes that crackers must be burst on Diwali, but with responsibility. I am not anti-science. I am not anti-progress. I am not anti-development. But I think it's important to learn certain important lessons. And the best part of being a Bharatiya is that you don't need to learn these lessons from the West. Your culture, your civilization has always respected Prakriti, because there is no dharma without Prakriti. I have 4.5 minutes left. I'll just take some time to share an experience that I recently had. In August of this year, I had the good fortune of being in the Sannidhi of the Sringeri Acharyas. And there I also happened to visit the research center called the Advaita Research Center, ARC. I'm dropping names simply because you know that this is not some taxi driver story that a journalist created to push a political propaganda. These are real stories. So as part of my visit to that center, I came across a young scholar who basically hails from Andhra Pradesh, unfortunately divided Andhra Pradesh, who was sporting the shikha, the sacred tuft of hair, spoke perhaps in crisp English, was wearing the traditional attire, was a qualified or is a qualified aerospace engineer from the United States, who's grown up in the United States, has given up all of that to pursue Indic research in Sringeri. And his area of research happens to be principles of environmentalism that can be culled out from Arthaśāstra. His name, I think, is Lalitaditya, fantastic name, of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir. That's where the name comes from. So this gentleman was looking at principles of environmentalism from Arthaśāstra, where Chanakya or Kautilya or Vishnugupta is specifying how do you use environment or a forest for military purposes, for espionage, for dharmic purposes, for environmental purposes, and for commercial purposes. One of the prescriptions, and perhaps an inbuilt prescription or a prohibition, is that you will not destroy an existing forest for commercial purposes. You must create a forest for it to be used for commercial purposes. So you must buy land, create a forest, so that you know what is the pain it takes to create a forest in the first place, the time that is consumed, before you fell a tree with quickening ease. That is the lesson that Chanakya teaches. There are enough and more principles to draw from. Why is it that it's important for you to know this about your culture? Because each time a so-called new idea presents itself, the person who receives that new idea is not only surprised or is not only expressing awe at that particular idea, he thinks, oh, the culture this idea has come from must be a superior culture to mine. That is the subconscious train of thought that goes on in people's heads, fortunately or unfortunately so. So when people realize that this is the height of thought that this civilization has produced, is capable of producing, and the God's willing in plural will continue to be capable of producing, I think it does a lot to your confidence as an individual. So my request to you is, as much as you pursue your career as an engineer, I say this as an engineer who's transitioned to perhaps, as as humanitarian a subject as possible, which is law, do not see engineering and humanities and the arts in silos. A lot of people who come from the science stream have a certain ego where they look down upon people who come from the liberal arts. Remember, you work, but policy will always be set by people who are from the humanities.
So this was actually a requested video, and I watched it. I'm not gonna continue with the questions because some of them are very specifically targeted to, like Bharatian thing, and I don't simply have awareness of it, nor I understand this. If I was to go into internal matters of India, I think I would go crazy. But nonetheless, I found this speech very, very on point and very fascinating. So I've taken a number of notes and I'll try to make sense of it as I go. So if I understand this correctly, this is more of his speech, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm working slightly off this assumption, that Bharat has still a lot of influence from what you guys call colonial mindset. Now, for me, in a way, it's hard to relate because Slovakia never colonized anything, nor we were colonized. However, where I always draw similarities that we were also under the 1,000 rules of Hungarians, and we were slaves to all the countries around, like Czech, Austria, Hungary, pretty much even Poland at some point, although Poland not as much. But so I guess my perspective might be coming from that point of view where I see the similarities of what I call a slave mentality. And there are a number of things that he had mentioned that I kind of really like, and I would want to elaborate on, since this was also educational institution. So I think a lot of things come down to when you are trying to rebuild society. And I've been observing this with Slovakia, and I think it's to an extent similar with India. And because you've been suppressed your knowledge, and obviously Bharat has a rich culture. And I see that there is a movement. You guys are learning a lot, and perhaps you don't know that much about, still about everything about Bharat history. Things have been destroyed. Similarly, funnily enough, you guys made me look into kind of ancient Slavic history, and I've been recently reading books, and to my discovery, it's and I've recently been talking about that in my comments, and I think in the iceberg video, that Slavic history is kind of not really that known. They are claiming that we came around 5th century or 6th century to our area, and there was a great movement of nations, and this has been currently dispelled. And the more I'm learning about it, the more I'm realizing that there has been a very, very strong push to completely eradicate Slavic culture, and everything has been burned. And for that matter, then how do you discover your culture if it's been a quite systemic approach to completely but utterly eradicate that? Okay, and then but if we are now taking the leap to current reality, and you guys are rebuilding yourselves, Slovakia is in a way rebuilding itself. And what I see is important for countries that lost their confidence and their their kind of cultural consciousness, and he talks about cultural consciousness as well, is that from what I've observed from building, let's say, the America, I think in America, They build the kind of Americanness through having heroes, through having characters, through being the first. And I feel like when you are, and I think that you guys are lucky because you have a rich culture and you still have crazy amount of stuff documented. But with Slovakia, it's much harder. We actually, because we're such a small nation, we actually really do not know a lot about our history. And our history, I think, is just one big nonsense. The more I'm looking into it, the more it's crazy. And I think when you start to respect your roots, I think no matter if you're Slovak or Indian, I think it does start where I agree with him, with respecting where you come from. We might, as the people that were suppressed and look at other countries, not feel good enough or valuable, stupid, what have you. And there can be the inferiority complex. Because, for example, in Slovaks, there is, like, I always say that people here would sell their mother for 5 cents. Sometimes I really cannot stand the mentality. I'm not saying it's spread all over, but honestly, there is a sentiment like that. Because, and I think it comes from the fact that people are poor. And when people are poor, you first thing that you want to do is you want to get rich. And then you want to get rich, I guess, by all means possible. And then I know that the corruption is the same in Bharat as well. You guys have been telling me recently, it's a lot of it. And it's because, that's my theory, because you were poor and you are trying to climb the ladder on the Maslow, pyramid of the needs. So first your needs need to be met. And that's what's going to happen, right? So people are just trying and fighting to survival. And if you can steal and accumulate for yourself, who cares about anyone else? So that is one problematic thing. And then you're always looking to the other, the things work in the West the way they work. But the more I've been doing this channel, the more I'm realizing that I'm like, fuck the West, In all honesty, everyone would be so developed if it went around the world and exploited the people. I'm going to say it out loud. I don't effing care at this stage, like because I see, and the thing is, I actually was one of that person, and I did not, I think, appreciate my culture or anything before when I was younger. But that's the foolishness of your 20s. And in 20s, you are driven a lot by your ego. And it is so pathetic. It's beyond. The older you get, it's just laughable. So you basically are now looking at the people from the West because they are better. They have better things. They have better, the standard of living. But you're not appreciating the fact how they've gotten to it. Yes, then along the way, they've developed all these things. Like, for example, when we were in 90s, when my mom used to go to Germany, and she was obsessed with how clean it was, right? Like, and then it just goes with these all kind of small things, like, let's say in England, people queue, right? It would be rude not to queue. In Slovakia, oh my God, if you saw people getting on a bus, blind me, everyone's just so rude. And I think it does come from the whole pyramid of the needs that you're so at the bottom line that you are not self-actualized and you're not thinking more of who I want to be as a person. Now, to me, I see it problematic because we look up to so much the Western cultures that we don't look at, like, how do I want to be as a person and how do I want to contribute to society? Now, I don't know how it's in Bharat, but in Slovakia, it's a very tricky game because a lot of things are corrupt. You get jobs, I think, here through friends and family, which on the other hand is not a bad thing. But on the small scale, you don't get enough job opportunities. For example, in the UK, it's normal that you recommend a friend and it's welcome, right? But here it would be almost you looked at as a protectionism. type of a situation, but I think it just depends on the level of evolution and the market economy. And now, if we are talking about going back to the culture, so Bharat has a very, very rich culture. And I think for a country to develop correctly and grow, it needs positive examples. It needs heroes. It needs people that achieved a lot. So I do think that you have so many great examples that you can draw from. In Slovakia, it is harder because I think we do have some people, but no one really understands in Slovakia what they've done and what their accomplishment was. That's the problem. And this is where I see America's done that a lot. So that's kind of a hero thing, because the second component of, I believe, building a nation, and that's just my thoughts, is you have to aspire to moral positive idols, heroes. You have to, as a country, you have to build heroes. And where this all falls short is the fact that when you are poor, and you don't have the education, and you don't have a knowledge, and you have no one to inspire you to be the best version of you, you will succumb to mediocrity or just pure survival. But this is where I think that the balance game is being played until a nation and country perhaps comes back to their roots and develops their and starts to look to idols for, and idols, I mean, like, this is a moral character that perhaps I would want to aspire to be. For example, for some, it can be Sai Deepak, okay? That is like, look at the character, look at how he talks, look at what he talks about, look at his actions, right? But we are by no means, none of us is perfect, right? Like, we live, and this is what people need to realize when they're idolizing people. We live in a dual reality. You have to have good and bad, because without that, there would be no progress and no development. It's just simple as that. If you don't like it, it's your problem. It's just the facts that I'm speaking here. And we need kind of like a guidance. So this is why people have religion. But if you don't have any religions, and you cannot look up to Krishna, Buddha, or Jesus, right? Like, you want to see that morality translated in your parliament and in your key statement. And I think that for a lot of you, Modi is quite of a good example of a statesman. We don't have that one in Slovakia. But we also have to always appreciate, as I said, that we cannot idolize people, because no one is perfect, no one. And I think the value of a person is inherent, and we always need to, and to me, it's good enough if people are continuously working on themselves. But people, I feel like in our cultures, they do not want to work in themselves, because you've been enslaved for so long that you feel entitled now to be given things just because. And fortunately or unfortunately, this is not how the world works. You always have to go through the journey again. And I don't judge this because I don't know if I make a backlash for it, but the world, the way it works is civilizations come and civilizations go. It's a circle of life. I feel like Hindus should know that more than anyone better. So there is no point in beating yourself up or like, okay, but what has happened? Because I've asked you guys before, what has happened? That, you know, you got so separated and you had an English rule and they kind of really divided and conquered. Sometimes it's important to understand the causes so you can learn from the past. But on the other hand, you can just accept things like, this is what has happened. So I don't dwell on it. I don't do any victim mentality. What I see in my comments is crazy amount of victim mentality. I'm not saying everyone, but just move on. Accept the fact that the way the world works, and you should know better than any other culture, that civilizations come and go. It's a natural circle of life. So my civilization went, you know, your civilization went, but it's reclaiming itself. And as much as it's important to understand the whys, and people can look into that, it's more important to understand who I want to be and stop looking at the West. And I've seen recently so many podcasts, or many podcasts, or many a podcast, I guess, where Slovak people were so cursing the Anglo-Saxons and everything. It's mental. Because we're also looking up to the West. I know that most of you guys don't understand that the Europe is actually not one country, but the concept is very different. And we're, I don't know, the West does is a maybe neocolonialism, I don't know. But you need to stop victimizing the past and say, oh, if only they didn't do that. Oh, if only that didn't happen. Oh, we had da 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 da. Cut it. Cut this shit out. You understand? The thing is, you have to move from where you are to where you want to be. This doesn't matter. You understand what are the current circumstances, current impact, and how do you move from it. So stop going around and blaming things. And I could be blaming Hungarians for 1,000 years of constant genocide of Slovakia, and how they try to ensure that we are illiterate and kill us literally. There were shootings. So yes, it does make me angry when I read about it. It does make me angry that no one in Slovakia knows about it. But here we are, 2024. So it's good to be aware, but it's important to learn the lessons and move ahead. And you can move ahead when you also have a strong sense of character. And I think that's another huge topic that he is trying to discuss. And I think that at the start he talks about like he's asked not to take the credit for what he hasn't done. And the large part of his I believe lecture was about the interconnectedness between individual and cultural. And I think that we change the society as we change on an individual basis. This is why I'm a life coach. And I don't think anyone really gets it. There tends to be those kind of memes, if you say like people who want change and people who want to change. So everyone wants to change, but no one wants to change. I don't think why that is so hard to understand, but unless you change on every single personal individual level to aspire to be the best person you can be, not much will change, because you are that one candle that continuously, the way it shows up to the world, lights candles next and next and next, and it creates a chain reaction. Now, I know there is way too many people in India, and perhaps it's a not overnight revolution, but the whole thing is about your individual self. And in the countries like ours, there is a big drive of the ego, because there is this disparity. You've been told for so long that you are incapable, illiterate, stupid, what have you, not good enough, that when you slightly achieve something, your ego shoots through the roof. And that's what he was also talking about. And you feel arrogant. And this is why I talk about each and individual level to moderate yourself. You are a speck of dust, not even speck of dust in this whole universe. I'm like, seriously, who the fuck do you think you are? Have some humility. This is what he was saying. You can be the best you can be, but if your character is shite, what message are you sending to people around you? Honestly, ask yourself, what message are you sending to people around you? Is that what you want other people to see and copy? I don't think that we realize sometimes how we impact other people just the way we are being. Because some people that they're maybe not as character strong looks for other people for guidance. Is that how you would want people to behave? And if the answer is yes, then I don't know what to say to you, right? Like if and there is just so much arrogance on my channel and a superiority complex of like, I am, like my civilization is better than anything else. And honestly, I really don't like it. I really don't appreciate it, because this is an opposite of coming from inferiority complex to superiority complex. I mean, yes, you have an Asian civilization. That doesn't really mean that you are anything less, because if you learn just a thing or two from Gita, you would never write anything like that. And that just tells me that a lot of people have not embedded the culture, are not in one with the culture. And just because you have the Vedas, or like the invented zero, did the first rhinoplasty, what have you, people these days, we're talking about these days, will not care, because if you are showing with a shitty character, they will not. And as tough it is as it is to hear, it is the reality. It is just what it is. No one likes shitty people. No one likes people coming and saying they're superior. Now, I understand your concerns with the West and how they look at you, but this is the same way they look at us. We're the trash of the Europe here in Slovakia. Are you kidding me? You think that you're the only ones that they're being racist against? But you know what? I never gave a fucking shit about it. And I lived there for 15 years of my life, I think. I never did. And you know why? Because I had an English boyfriend. And my English boyfriend told me that no one cares in England about your nationality. They all care about the best job that you can do. And that's it. And that's how I lived my life. And I never was discriminated. But guess what? A friend of mine who's Slovak, she's super hot, she's super smart, because she has in her mentality that English are racist, which I'm not actually debating against that. But she's been experiencing things like, and she worked for like Vanguard, and they were English people, because you can imagine they're like, it's a wealth management company. So you have the proper old school English guys saying that her accent is too strong, and they didn't want to work with her, because they have this superiority mindset. But I don't let those people define who I am. How you treat others is a reflection of you. Do I treat others always 100% the way I would want? Perhaps not. But this is what I'm saying. It's about continuous self-growth and self-development and being aware what's happening and being aware of your triggers. And, I really don't like it when people on the channel are just like smirking about like, we are the oldest civilization, blah, 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 blah. It just shows that you haven't developed in the character. So for me, if the next thing that comes and they say, because this is what I'm reading, that actually Proto-Slavic is the first and original civilization out of which everything developed. Do you think that I would go around and telling people on YouTube channels that, oh my God, look at this Slavic thing, like we're the best, we were here the first? This just shows that you've never worked on yourself. This just shows that you are very, very ego-driven, and nothing good can come out of people that are so very ego-driven. It's nothing good, because it is the story of, I felt hurt for so long, and I felt people were suppressing me, and now I'm going to show you. But you're just showing your character. You look at what Nelson Mandela has done in Africa. How he dealt with the whole racism. It wasn't from the point of view of, now I'm going to show you. Now we are better. Because I think when you're evolved on a certain level, you get to realize that this is not how you deal with problems or situations, showing a superiority. You need to meet people where they are. And you need to show the way you want things to be. and get people to aspire to ideal, to good character, because otherwise you're showing a bad character. Otherwise you are repeating the same culture. And this is what he's saying about people being arrogant in engineering. Oh, I've seen that in my life. Developers, they think that they are shit. They think that they are like the best thing since sliced bread. But let's get the lack of electricity, let's get Armageddon, let's see how valuable they're going to be. I think arrogance is never a good look on anyone. It's not. Or feeling that you're better than. If you have to feel that you're better than someone, you inherently have a problem inside of yourself. As a life coach, I can tell you that directly. That is a problem that you need to deal with, because we're all created equal. Whether I'm talking from my perspective, okay? I know that perhaps many people might not have that point of view. Obviously, there's racism, all yada yada. But we are all created equal. We are humans. We have individual skills, competencies. So we need to work together for betterment of humanity. And what the thing is that the world is now, as it's getting more and more globalized, I wonder if the even question of nationality is going to be the thing. I think it still will be the thing for a very, very long time. But if we're all equal, if we are all basically sparks of the divine, then we don't need to separate ourselves into different nations, because we're all one, we're all connected. And if you're hurting one, you're hurting the others. Now, obviously, this level of consciousness, everyone has different views and perspective, but I feel like looking at purely individual, like a physical level, that's just the energy. That's just the energy. You know about butterfly effect. If they start waving in one end of the world, they cause things in the other parts of the world. We're not disconnected, and everything needs to be thought about in context. And yes, I do believe that we should first seek to learn things within our culture. We should, if you have it. I think with history, we have to always appreciate it. For example, like you had Nalanda, all the knowledge has been burned. A lot of things have been burned, but a lot of things on your end has been retained. So the more I'm looking into it, the more I'm realizing I never really know the truth. What has happened and how exactly has it happened? Does it really matter? On the other hand, I guess what matters right now is here now and who you can be as a person. I think that the most single important message is that you need to work on yourself as a person. And yes, I think when it comes to, I'm not too sure, I don't know what to think, to be honest, and how I think about it, because I think I would need to spend some time really examining what my position is about the conditioning with your, when he was talking about original thought and where you come from. I think you should respect your roots. And yes, your culture gives you sometimes unique perspective in the world market. He says that both should be connected. I think that they not necessarily have to be. I don't think I have a strong point of view on this one, but I just feel like you should respect where you come from, and you should not be ashamed where you come from just because other people were telling you that before. I think it's ridiculous, right? And for me, the more I realize, so during communism, my great-grandfather, he was basically sent to concentration camps. So the concentration camp during your favorite people of Russia, they were as bad as the ones in Hitler Germany. So my great-granddad was there, and he was sent to like a Uranian mines. And I've always since then, I've really absorbed that and realized that, I'm given this life and I can live a better life than him, than my parents, etc. I'm grateful and I respect that, and this is why I'm appreciative of my roots. The more I read about what has happened to Slovak people during Hungarization and how they were systematically, just like for you guys British, been trying to decimate basically and genocide us, and how I saw how Slovak people were fighting against that and how they came together, I'm like, fuck me, that's amazing. So these are the things that also give you and can give you in your history, because I'm sure you have many, many more examples than I do in Slovak, to draw on that and just respect your ancestry. And there are things that you might like or might not like about the culture, and that's okay. Pick the good ones. I always say there were good things about communism and there were shitty things about communism. But when the revolution here happened, we said everything was bad, but it's not the case. And people need to stop being so black and white. Okay? Because it doesn't help. Let's pick things that work good in that system. And what he's saying, that let's look at the Western thought. And if it has a value, why not adopt it? And why not make it, I believe this is what he was saying, by like Bharatinizing it. Let's make it our own. For example, Mandir economy that Ankit Shah talks about would never work in Europe because we don't have temples, we don't have that, it's a different culture. It would simply never work. But I don't know. Maybe let's look at the way the highways are being built in India and what we can learn from India in the West, or let alone, talking ISRO. I never know how to pronounce it correctly. And the moon landing mission. That's what I say. Like, let's just. I always say pick and choose, but why not just take things that work and discard the things that we don't believe that should be used or did not work before and make things better. That's all what the life is about. But I think for me, it all starts with an individual level. Really, the people, I don't think that it really hits you, but because I coach people, it really, all your impact is about you, no one else. You came to this world, you come here alone, you leave alone, okay? So just decide who you want to be. How much of a culture do you want to integrate? How much of your values come from that? Do you want to borrow other values because you feel that you're more aligned with that? It doesn't mean that if you overtake some values from other culture, that you're not necessarily going against your culture. You're just evolving as your unique being. And it's about really the impact that you want to leave in this world. Because at the end of the day, no fame, no money, nothing will ever matter. And I know it's for people that are maybe now up to the 30s, early 30s, it might be slightly a different one. But I think that the older I get, these things don't matter. What matters is really family and people and the impact you're able to make in their other life. Now, I'm not saying to be misused. This is why coaching is so important, or going to a psychologist. Because you need to have a clear boundaries. You need to understand and grow to who you want to be. And that's never an easy journey, but it's a journey worth taking, because what you build for yourself and how you build yourself as a character, no one can take away from you. And with that being said, I leave it right here. Thank you so much, you guys, for watching this rant with me. And I hope you liked it. And if you did, you know what to do. Please hit that like icon, hit that subscribe button. And I will see you next one. Until then, please do take care. I'm sending lots of love. Bye.